My vampire feet made me move so sweet. The moonlight is an extra treat. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. My vampire feet made me move so sweet. The moonlight is an extra treat. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Thanks for we are having a ball. Let's go, y'all. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. We dance until we get that feel of romance. Don't leave it to chance. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Get that blood pumping so we can do some vampire sucking. No time like now to be my vampire child. Groove, let's all do the vampire move.
She was 19 years old and a complete innocent when it came to boys. She had planned to give her innocence away to someone special. When she decided to take a ride from a complete stranger, that plan would change. Her virginity would be lost in the most bizarre way ever, and she would live to tell about it, even though half of the blood in her body had been drained. The vampire monster we discussed today lived in a quiet neighborhood, had a good job and a brilliant mind, but when night fell, women beware. John Crutchley turned from nerd to nightmare. Oh, well, look who crept in after midnight. I'm Holly the Vampire, your host of True Crime Fright. Welcome, my beautiful little night nerds, to the Murder She Said, where the tea is red, the stories are dead, and your host is undead. In Murder She Said, the shadows are deep, and the secrets we uncover will steal your sleep. Now, before we get our fangs into tonight's tale of terror, I must remind you to hit that subscribe button. It's that one, the little red coffin-shaped one. It doesn't bite. Well, not hard, but I might. I kind of get the nibbles every once in a while. It's to be expected. Happy Halloween to all my little snacks. Subscribers. I was going to say, make sure you stay till the end where I add some bloopers. You know that little dance move, vampire dance move I did at the beginning? Well, I actually wrote that song and had AI do the music. So I'm hoping YouTube's not picky about that music, because I thought the song turned out really nice, actually. And I was going to add it to the end with some bloopers. I want to say before I begin that when I do my videos for Halloween month, I mean no disrespect for the cases I talk about and to the victims involved. Sometimes when I dress up in the month of October, I'll get comments saying that I'm being disrespectful. And no, I'm just simply trying to make a little change in my videos for, a season of Halloween. So it's no disrespect for any of my cases, and it doesn't mean they mean any less to me. Viewer discretion is advised on this video, since John, he does have a bedroom freaky side. We'll just label it that way. All right, my little cave dwellers, let's begin. All the 1980s when greed was good, hair was high, and all necks tasted like Aqua Net hairspray. In fact, once in a while I can still taste that taste in my mouth. Nastiest taste. Good hairspray, but nasty taste. Well, the shoulder pads were so big that they were basically vampire-proof armor alone. The music was so epic that it could even make the undead dance under the moonlight. But every era has its monsters, and in the neon haze, John Crutchley was one of them. John Crutchley, the mask of the perfect man hiding a far uglier truth. A man who seemed to have a perfect home life, a smiling wife, a young son, a house on 2.5 acres, a jacuzzi, and a covered pool. All the trappings of the so-called American dream. But anyone could smell the rot beneath it, the darkness twisting quietly in his bones. John Crutchley was 5 feet 10 inches of human vanity, weighing in at about 150 pounds, blue eyes, sturdy blonde hair, a man who thought his stuff didn't stink. But I smell the stench of darkness from here. But then again, the stench could be the garlic my husband tried to poison me with at dinner. Not gonna lie, it could be me. Well, anyway, he had a brilliant mind for mathematics and computers. He even crafted classified codes for the U.S. Navy. impressive on paper if you ignore the rot lurking underneath. A big brain, a big paycheck, well, we'll get to that later. That gets kind of awkward, but I gotta tell y'all about that too. It's part of the story. Well, what I'm trying to say, all the ingredients for the perfect little trophy husband. On the surface, he was the model citizen, the family man, the shining pillar of the community, and yet beneath that gleaming veneer lurked something darker, something truly unsavory. All humans so clever, so polished, and yet so oblivious to the monsters hiding in their own homes. When John was a child, his sister had passed away, and this upset John's mother so much, she started making John dress girly. Back the first 5 years of his life, he only wore girl clothes. Even at the tender age of 5, John was forced to endure the relentless humiliation of being dressed as a girl. John's mother also repeatedly told him while he was a toddler and young boy that she had wanted a girl instead of him, and that she did not like boys. The cruel insistence gnawed at him, leaving him angry, exhausted, and painfully isolated. Neither John's mom nor dad showed any affection toward him, which led John to develop permanent feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness of love. In fact, his mother was actually cruel. On one occasion, she actually burned his fingers with a curling iron. And on other times, she would beat him unconscious with a belt. Even at such a tender age, the damage was more than physical. It carved confusion, fear, and alienation into the foundation of who he was becoming. Because of the fear his mother installed in him, John grew to fear women, and the shadows of that terror clung so tightly that he remained untouched, a virgin, until the age of 21. Due to his profound emotional insecurity and absence of even the most basic social skills, John avoided girls altogether, steering clear of the typical teenager rituals of dating. His desires, such as they were, remained confined to fantasies, but not the ordinary lust-driven imaginings of a boy. No, John's mind wandered instead to control, domination, and exertion of power over the girls he fixated on, often through aggression and violence. Even then, long before the world fully knew him, the seed of something monstrous had already taken root, twisting quietly in the dark corners of his thoughts. While attending college, he grew a love for electronics, discovered he was bisexual, and met and married his first wife, whom he did not love. She was always eager to please him and fulfill his every need, so he figured she would do. His first wife would recall her former husband as a man ruled by unrelenting impulses and an explosive, unpredictable temper, a man she ultimately came to fear. She described him as crazy, incapable of most anything, a predator whose appetite for group sex and wife swapping could twist without warning into violent, dangerous behavior. She also recalled how John took a twisted pleasure in strangling her during, the act, repeating it on multiple occasions. The violence seemed to excite him far more than any intimacy could, a cruel hunger lurking beneath the surface. It was only when, in a rare moment of self-preservation, she fought back and choked him in return that the assaults finally ceased. His ex-wife said John told her many times that he would have liked to have been a woman and that he often imagined himself as a woman. She believed it was because his mother had wanted him to be a girl and he held guilt for being a boy. Also, according to his ex, John had told her that he had been in a relationship with his younger sister, Caroline, for a period of time, because by now his mother had finally gave birth to a girl. According to John, the two had sex on the sofa in their parents' home on the night that he graduated from college. The ancestral relationship had apparently lasted for several years. After divorcing his first wife, he moved in with a woman named Lisa, who enjoyed the freaky side of him. He had an open relationship, sometimes swapping partners with other couples, and Lisa gave John the freedom to indulge his bisexual desires. According to Lisa and other women, John was, this is what I was going to say, physically well endowed. But anyway, he didn't use it as a blessing, he used it as a weapon. I won't go into more detail. This vampire girl had to work hard for this one. Lisa and John occasionally met couples with similar interests through naughty magazines. That's before, Farmers Only and things like that, which somehow I can't see Farmers Only being as freaky as of people they met, but they must have their moments. I would know as a vampire. Anyway, what I'm trying to say, these magazines would help them meet other couples. That's so they can have like weekend twister games, if you know what I mean, darling. To supplement his diet, John also developed a habit of picking up women during business trips. Some of these women would say John would sometimes wear a mask in bed. Lisa said that John also enjoyed bondage and kept 4 ropes on the corners of his bed to tie up his male and female partners. Lisa would later tell authorities that during one bondage session, John had put his hands around her neck and started squeezing and choking her hard enough to cut off her air supply. And right before she passed out, he did release. How kind of him. Due in large part to the amount of freaky freak-out space she gave him, John became more attached to Lisa than any other woman whom he had developed a relationship. When Lisa abruptly ended their relationship, he was devastated and felt abandoned. He retreated behind the same walls he had built as a child, brick by brick, layer by layer, fortifying the darkness within. He bounced from one engineer job to another, usually getting fired for stealing. On January 6, 1978, while working in Maryland, he met Debbie Fitzjohn, who he began dating. The two shared some interests in the occult, but while John was interested in astrology and Satanism, Debbie only had a fledgling curiosity about horoscopes and tarot cards. After Debbie came home from a date with John one night, she told her granny, "He's a nut." She never went into detail about what that meant, though. One Friday night, January 27, 1978, Debbie had dinner with her granny, as she frequently enjoyed doing. Afterwards, she had planned on going over to John's trailer home. When dinner was over, her granny watched Debbie's blue 1976 station wagon pull away and grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared down the road. It was the last time she ever saw her granddaughter alive. Later that night, while looking for her granddaughter, she located her station wagon about a mile from John's house in a nightclub parking lot, but Debbie was nowhere to be found. She called John Crutchley that night, and he said Debbie had left his trailer home at about 11 that night. The police interviewed John, but he stuck to the same story. That after she arrived at his house, he fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie with her, and she left. "Oh, sure you did, John. Sure you did." John took a polygraph test, which shows that he was deliberately deceptive during parts of that exam. 9 months later, as the frost began to retreat from the earth, 3 hunters wandered into the woods of Fairfax County. Their hounds grew uneasy near the power lines, whining at something unseen. And there, half buried in the cold soil, the forest revealed its secret, a complete skull. A deeper search unearthed what little the earth had not yet claimed: the nearly skeletonized remains of a woman, unclothed and left in a shallow grave, her bones resting beneath Virginia's soil. Because the body had lingered too long in the clutches of decay, its flesh reclaimed by soul and silence, Fairfax County investigators sought the help of minds who could read what the bones remembered. The remains were sent to the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and it was soon found out that the body belonged to 25-year-old Debbie Fitzjohn. As the days drifted by, Fairfax County prosecutors sifted through all of the evidence the police had gathered against John. In the end, without explanation, prosecutors deemed it insufficient to seek a criminal indictment from a grand jury. There would be no criminal prosecution of Crutchley for Debbie Fitzjohn's murder. There would not even be an arrest. And so Deborah Fitzjohn's voice faded into the dark, her story sealed in a folder and left to gather dust. Even I, a vampire, must admit there is nothing more chilling than the justice of mortals. But no justice would be found for young, beautiful Debbie. In December 1979, just a few months after Debbie's skeletal remains were found, John moved to McLean, Virginia, and got a job as a manager for the electronic systems section of TRW's Defense and Space Systems. Oh yes, the irony drips thicker than blood. John, the monster masquerading in a man's skin, was at the time held in such dazzling esteem that the federal government itself welcomed him into its sanctum. In December of 1979, he was granted a secret security clearance, and by the following year, a top secret one, the kind that opened doors most mortals could never dream of entering. He wandered freely through the Pentagon's hushed corridors, past coded logs and classified files. The humans around him saw only intellect, composure, and trustworthiness, never suspecting that beneath his tailored suit beat the heart of a predator. During the same period of time that John worked for TRW and routinely visited the Pentagon, the body of a missing female employee was found in the Pentagon's fast parking lot. The victim had been strangled in her own car. No one was charged with her murder. While dwelling in the shadowed outskirts of Washington, D.C., John Crutchley found a new kind of mentor, a nurse with a fascination that bled well beyond medicine. She didn't just patch wounds, she opened them. It was she who led him down the crimson path that would become his true obsession. By her hand, he learned the tools of the trade, the precision of needles, the slow draw of syringes, the steady pulse of a vein, and he learned how much blood could be taken before reaching a level that might take someone's life. To her, it was ritual, to him, revelation. From his very first exposure to the practice of bloodletting, he had found it inherently erotic, and fantasizing about it aroused him as well. As an essential element for human life, blood represented power. Taking blood from another person and ingesting it made it his own. Feeding on the essential life fluid fed his need for dominance and control. Dominance? Oh, I know that well. The moment when another's heartbeat syncs with your own, when control hangs in the air like incense, it's intoxicating, it's primal, it's the closest thing to divinity mortals will ever feel. But here's where John and I part ways, because even a vampire knows the line between hunger and horror. To take blood is one thing, to take life is another. A true creature of the night feeds to sustain, not to extinguish. To kill is to silence the very music that gives our thirst meaning. But what use is power if it devours the world that grants it? But for John, the darkness inside him began to grow. In March 1980, John met and married Karen Luley. As with his first wife, love had little to do with it. John did not feel affection for Karen, not in any way mortals would recognize. What he felt was possession, that cold and calculated satisfaction of owning something pliant and obedient. Karen, with her soft voice and timid manner, was precisely the kind of woman he preferred, the kind who would never challenge, never question, only yield to him. He took comfort in knowing she would bend to his every command, no matter how dark, how strange, or how disgusting. The marriage was not a union of hearts, but a contract of convenience, a disguise to let him pass unnoticed among the living. Way to keep his appetites hidden behind the mask of domestic normalcy. 7 months later, Karen gave birth to a little boy they named Jason. In 1983, John packed up his darkness and headed south with his family to Florida. Naturally, where else? It's as if the sunniest state in America secretly calls to the weirdest souls. The land of endless beaches, neon tans, and mosquitoes the size of bats. The perfect hiding place for a monster who preferred his victims warm and breathing and sometimes not breathing. Yes, it depended. He joined Harris Corporation in Palm Bay, Florida as an associate principal engineer in their government electronic systems division. A great paying job. After a couple of house hunting trips to Florida, John and Karen purchased a 4-bedroom home in Malabar, located just east of Palm Bay. It was there beneath the glaring sun and swaying palms that John, true nature, could no longer hide in the shadows. For every victim who vanished quietly into his world, there was one who fought back. One who would not be consumed. Her name was Laura Murphy, just 19. She survived his torment, a beacon of defiance in the midst of his cruelty. It was in her eyes and in her escape that the mask of the charming engineer cracked. Here we begin the terrifying escape of Laura Murphy, the woman who exposed a monster and a house of horrors. 19-year-old Laura was innocent when it came to boys, but like all girls, she still enjoyed the attention of boys. It all started when she fell head over heels with a boy from Florida. Laura lived in California, and the young man was visiting her state when they first met. After he returned home, the letters and calls began. When Carl, the boy she liked, suggested she come to Florida, she leapt at the chance, believing this to be the first true test of their budding love. It was to be her first solo journey, a week-long escape, thrilling in its independence and weighed with anticipation. She booked a direct flight from Los Angeles to Orlando, and within days she found herself whisked away to his world. While Carl was working, Laura would stay at the trailer home with his mother. Just hang out with Mama in the trailer home. Sounds really exciting. Oh, first true love. On November 21st, 1985, she just happened to be spending another day waiting for Carl to get home from work. So she listened to music on his Walkman and watched a little TV. By one that afternoon, she was bored out of her mind, so she decided to take a walk to say goodbye to some of Carl's friends that she had met since she got there. Just flying back to California the next morning. She had not gone far when a small light-colored car pulled up beside her. Behind the wheel of the two-door automobile sat a clean-shaven man wearing a stylish navy blue sports coat, black and white striped tie, and eyes hiding behind dark-tinted sunglasses. The sort of garments that whispered success rather than discount rack. On his feet he wore loafers, though oddly enough he had removed them, steering the car with bare feet. Personally, I don't think that's odd. Often drive barefooted. I prefer it. Do y'all know vampires drive? Well, we do. We don't just fly. We also drive. But I guess Laura found it strange, but only enough to raise an eyebrow. After all, Florida had a way of normalizing the unusual. There was something about him, the polished exterior, the carefully arranged dirty blonde hair, the way he seemed at ease yet untouchable, that made her pulse quicken in ways she couldn't explain. Flashing a broad, almost too perfect smile, he leaned forward and rolled down the passenger side window. His voice was smooth, friendly, reassuring, the kind that put you at ease before you even realized you were uneasy. It's a bit wet today for a walk, isn't it? He said with a grin. Can I give you a lift? Laura hesitated for only a moment. There was nothing in the bright midday sun or the bustling public space to suggest danger. He seemed harmless enough, and so, with the casual trust of someone unused to suspicion, she nodded. Well, she said, her voice slow and deliberate, as though buying herself time to measure the stranger before her. I'm on my way to Melbourne to meet some friends. Are you going anywhere near there? Sure, he replied. His tone easy practice. I have to go that way to get to my office. I just need to stop by my house real quick to just grab a notebook for work. Won't take more than a minute or two. Go ahead and hop in. Laura hesitated, a flicker of instinct warning her to step back. She studied him once more, the too perfect smile, the sunglasses, hiding eyes that seemed just a little too knowing. But curiosity, politeness, and the lure of seeming safety won out. She reached for the passenger side door handle. Oh, how easily mortals convince themselves of safety. He leaned in, interested, or so it seemed, and she, naive as the living often are, felt a flicker of relief. His words flowed smoothly, careful, polished charm designed to soothe and disarm. To Laura it seemed normal, ordinary even, but I who have walked long enough among the shadows recognized the hum beneath his voice, the subtle pull in his manner, the way control clung to him like a second skin. Mortals call it charisma. Vampires know it as a scent of a predator testing its prey. Minutes passed, the tires crunching over a bumpy dirt road. The sun shone innocently above, but it did nothing to pierce the dark intentions lurking in the car. He turned onto a gravel driveway hidden behind tall, concealing hedges, a place where daylight loses its courage, and there in that quiet, enclosed space, the hunt began in earnest. I'll be right back, he said, removing the key from the ignition and sliding his shoes onto his bare feet. He stepped out of the car, moving with the easy confidence of a predator who knows the forest will part for him. The side door of the house, he paused and glanced back, a smile curving just a little too perfectly. Hey, you want to come inside for a drink? His voice was casual, but disarming. Beneath it, a subtle undertone hummed, something that made the hair along her neck rise. Laura smiled politely. Oh, no thanks. My friends are expecting me, and I don't want them to worry. Suit yourself, he replied, unlocking the door and slipping inside as if swallowed by shadows, leaving her alone. The car sat there quiet. Moments later, he reappeared, laughing lightly, as if embarrassed by some oversight. "The notebook must be in the back of the car," he said. Flashed that same smug alligator smile and slid into the back seat. He crawled into the back seat and began looking around for the notebook. Suddenly, the back of Laura's seat shot forward, slamming her violently against the dashboard. She could feel ropes tighten around her hands, and then suddenly everything went black. When Laura's eyes fluttered open, the world came back in fragments, sound, shadow, and the sharp sting of nylon cutting into her wrist. She lay upon a raised countertop, about 4 feet from the floor, the sterile chill of a kitchen pressing against her skin. The air smelled faintly of metal, bleach, and something darker, coppery and intimate. It was blood. Her arms were stretched above her head, bound tight with white nylon rope that bit into her flesh with every tremor. Her ankles, too, were tied, leaving her spread open, vulnerable and displayed like an offering upon an altar. A lone bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting a thin cone of light that swung gently, making shadows breathe against the walls. In that half-dark room, a camera blinked red like a mechanical eye watching, recording, feeding. He stood over her pale, the kind of man whose presence made the air feel thinner. Round his neck gleamed a star-burst pendant, catching the light in cruel flashes. When he saw her eyes open, a slow grin spread across his face, not joy, but possession. Laura's body went rigid, fear taking hold like frost, her pulse beating loud enough for any predator, even me, to hear. He began to undress her, even though she pleaded with him just to let her go. He then took her innocence. John tightened the rope around her neck until she passed out. She woke to the pain of a sharp prick on her arm. It felt like a shot. But the man had put tape over her eyes so she could not see. A strange sucking noise filled the silence and an odd feeling in her arm. Terrified, she asked, "What are you doing?" He responded, "I am a vampire and I'm drinking your blood." She had blacked out shortly after the man told her that he was a vampire. She awoke after he had drunk his fill of her blood. Then he untied her from the table, handcuffed her around the wrist, and shackled her ankles with a second pair of handcuffs. And then he basically dragged her to the bathroom because she was just too weak to walk. Removed her earrings, telling her that they were in the way. She shivered as he began sucking on her neck and forced her onto her back in the yellow tub. Then he warned her to be quiet and stay still. After what seemed like hours, but may have only been minutes, the bathroom door opened and the nameless man reappeared. He lifted her up from the bathtub, slowly led her out of the room, and guided her back into the hallway. They continued further down the hall, and he took her into his bedroom. Once they were in the room, the man handed her a pill and told her to swallow it. She had no idea what the pill was, but she was afraid of angering him, so she did not hesitate in swallowing it. As he was assaulting her, he also began to strangle her. She came to from the effects of the pill. She was no longer blindfolded, and she realized that in her arms were needles with a hose attached. He was draining her blood into a beaker-shaped glass jar, at times sucking on the hose like a straw to make the blood flow faster. When it was about half full of the crimson liquid, the man lifted the beaker to his lips. Laura heard swallowing sounds as he drank deeply. Fighting the primal urge to scream, Laura's voice trembled through the still air. "Will you please let me go?" she whispered. Her words soft, fragile, like a candle flickering before the wind. He froze for a heartbeat, head tilting slightly as though the question amused him. Faint smile ghosted across his lips, the kind that carried no warmth. She could tell from the distance look in his eyes that he had no intention of letting her go. Having drank his fill of her blood, the man took her back to the bathroom and forced her into the bathtub again, her wrists and ankles once again bound. And this time he also blindfolded her with thick masking tape. He repeated his previous warning about remaining quiet. She waited until she heard what sounded like the front door closing. She spotted it then, a sliver of salvation glinting faintly in the half-darkness. A small metal frame window set high above the bathtub, its glass fogged and freckled with mildew. Couldn't have been more than 4.5 feet off the ground, narrow as a coffin slit, but to her it shimmered like the promise of dawn. Her pulse quickened. Maybe I'm small enough to fit through. She studied it carefully, heart thudding in her throat. There were locks, one on each side, old, rusted, but not beyond hope. It was her lucky day because on the window was a slide lock on each side, but one side was broken. If it had not been, she would not have been able to reach both sides because of her handcuffs. Having pried the window open with the trembling strength of sheer terror, Laura clawed at the frame until her fingernails tore and bled. Green finally gave way, bursting outward into the rain-soaked night. The air that rushed in was cold and heavy like the breath of a grave. With one final gasping effort, she pulled herself through the narrow slit of freedom, the rough edges of the bricks ripping her skin open as she wriggled through. When she finally slipped loose, her body tumbled forward face first into the wet earth below. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. For a long second, she lay there half buried in mud and grass, the world spinning in and out of focus. Her arms were raw, her legs bleeding from dozens of cuts, her body weak and cold from the blood that had been taken from her. But terror is a powerful stimulant. Somewhere inside, something ancient and primal screamed for survival. She dragged herself upright, trembling, the towel still clutched in one shaking hand. Her ankles rattled with each step. The cold bite of steel cuffs forced her into an awkward, jerking hobble. The house loomed behind her, dark and silent, except for a faint hum from within, an electric sound, like a camera still recording. She dared not look back. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every gust of wind whispered, "Run!" She then spotted a road. She began hobbling down the street naked, but for the towel draped loosely over her body. She saw lights appearing in the distance with all her strength. She tried to flag them down. It was two women who just kept driving, too afraid to stop. Made them press the gas, not the brakes. They vanished, leaving her alone again, swallowed by the night. But then came another light. Brighter, closer, a truck rumbling down the road. The driver slowed, his face twisting in disbelief. Even in Florida, land of the bizarre, this was something new. A naked girl wrapped in a towel, handcuffed, smeared with blood, eyes wide with the terror of the hunted. I had seen a lot of things in Florida, but this was truly bizarre. Florida man got scared. Imagine that, Florida man scared. I'm just teasing you, Florida. She clambered in the truck before he could even speak, breath ragged, voice cracking, as she babbled about a man who said he was a vampire, about blood and needles and death. The driver hesitated, caught between reason and horror. He thought she might be high or hallucinating. There was something in her eyes, something that silenced every doubt, the look of someone who had seen through darkness. He drove her somewhere safe and called the ambulance. Humans like to call monsters vampires because it makes evil sound ancient, supernatural, something not born of their own kind. But what stalked her that night was no creature of legend. He was simply human, proof that the worst monsters need no immorality to taste blood. Laura would spend the next 2 days in the hospital before being deemed healthy enough to be released. She had nearly died from losing over 40% of her body's blood volume, and the creature who had fed on her blood was still at large, free to hunt new prey. But, unfortunately for John, Laura knew exactly where his house was located. The sheriff quickly learned that the house Laura was held captive in was owned by a married couple, John and Karen Crutchley. The officers were able to get a search warrant for the house and arrest John. John didn't wait for a lawyer to begin to talk. He stated his wife and son were in Maryland for the Thanksgiving holiday. Said that he was on his way home from his office when he spotted this girl hitchhiking on the road. And John said she begged for a ride to Melbourne, so he informed her that first he needed to swing by his house to get a notebook. But then he said that she started to talk about her fantasy was to be picked up by a stranger for some rough loving. He happily obliged. He even said she asked for something freaky that was her blood to be drained. And of course, he just so happened to have all the supplies. He must have thought those cops were brainless, maybe. But perhaps they kind of were because, well, you'll see how this ends. Police descended on the house like vultures, circling the scene of something long dead. Behind those bland beige walls was a house of horrors. Over 40 items were seized, videotapes stacked like trophies, nylon ropes coiled with purpose. Surgical tubing and syringes gleamed under the evidence lights. A glass beaker set among them still filled with drops of blood. Near these items, Laura's driver's license was found, proving that she had actually been inside. In the master bedroom closet, they found a large assortment of leather dog collars, even though Crutchley did not have any dogs, and also chains that were hanging near the collars. Plastic bags that held clippings of hair, souvenirs, trophies, who knows? Among the clutter, one book drew the eye, Killer Clown, a biography of John Wayne Gacy, another monster who had hidden behind a mask of normalcy. Hanging in neat rows beside his shirts were about 20 women's necklaces, none belonging to his wife. Most frightening of all was the 6 IDs they found belonging to dead or missing women. One of the cards he had was from Nancy Hay Brown, who had disappeared while vacationing in Florida. Her body had been discovered in the Florida groves, and she had died from a blow to the head. 16-year-old Cheryl Windsor and 20-year-old Diana Lee Casey. Bodies were both found near water at Marriott Island, Florida. Both of their IDs were also found in Crutchley's belongings. Also missing women, Kimberly Ann Walker and Lynn DeSantis, both from Florida. They also found the business card of the chief investigator in the Debbie Fitzjohn case among Crutchley's possessions. Debbie was the woman who had gone missing, remember, after dating John. There was also a stack of 25 credit cards. Investigators also discovered that his car had also been rigged so that he could pull a knob next to the radio and lock the passenger's side door via a wire that ran behind the dashboard to the passenger's door. Basically, the passenger couldn't get out once they got in. A missing woman, Patty Valansky, who was also last seen in Florida by a roommate on March 15, 1985, after she went hitchhiking. Her body was never found, but Crutchley is believed to be involved in her death. Mainly because in John's office inside a sandwich bag, officers found Patty's Florida ID, Social Security card, library card, and voter registration card, along with 2 photographs of Patty's son. In Crutchley's filing cabinet, they found a yellow 5x7-inch box filled with over 70 photographs of bound and gagged women who had been posed in various, positions. And in fact, I've seen some of these pictures in a book I read about this. Yeah, and they actually had the real crime scene photos, and they were disturbing. And of course, I can't show that on YouTube. In the same filing cabinet, the investigators discovered a card file box containing 72 3x5-inch index cards. Each card had a woman's name typed or written at the top along with her address and just different things about her that he wanted to remember. What did she like? What hobbies did she like? And what positions did she like? And just kind of weird things. They also found a box of slides and reams of computer paper that appeared to contain classified information about U.S. Navy operations, including submarine deployment data and satellite images of ships in the Middle East. The sheriff actually turned over the Navy information to federal agents who determined it be of significant national security interest. Although the sheriff anticipated that federal espionage charges would follow, none were ever filed against Crutchley. The morning newspaper hit doorsteps like a thunderclap. The headline screamed a truth his neighbors could never have imagined. The headline glared back at the town. Victim tells police attacker drank her blood. To his neighbors, John had been perfectly ordinary. Quiet, hard-working, a man who polished his motorcycles, nodded politely at the corner street, and even attended Malabar town meetings as a concerned citizen. All up and up, decent guy. Monsters, I have learned over the centuries, rarely announce themselves. They sip tea at the table, wave at children, and nod at the town meeting, while the echo of their deeds slithers quiet behind the scenes. Laura Murphy was initially too traumatized to file charges against John, but a counselor was eventually able to persuade her to do so by explaining that if Crutchley was found guilty, it would help stop him from being able to harm any more victims, which was the best thing that could have happened because apparently the cops were not going to stop him. Although officers suspected a videotape they found had been evidence of Laura's assault, it appeared John had time to erase it before the officers had arrived at his house to arrest him. Also, when he was out on bond, for some reason, they didn't confiscate his computer. They left it at the house, didn't even look what was on it. They left the jewelry out the house and other things, and they just simply disappeared while John was out on bond. Sound like geniuses, like I was saying. By this time, officers began to suspect unsolved homicides in Florida, Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, and that they could have a connection to the Florida vampire rapist, as he was now called in the paper. While sitting in jail, John told things to his cellmate. He said that if he had taken any more blood from Laura, she would have died, and then he sat with tears in his eyes and said she would have been the last one. Crutchley also described how he typically kept mementos of his victims, such as their driver's license and other types of ID cards, and apparently jewelry too. He said that in addition to the ID cards that investigators seized from his home and office, he had other ones that the police had never found. Souvenirs from victims in Virginia, Ohio, Florida, Washington. Crutchley also disclosed to his cellmate that he had videotaped some of his victims, but the police had not found those tapes either. He had a special hiding place underneath the printer in his house, a secret space for stashing some of his trophies. He had even hidden a notebook there that he referred to as his diary, a diary in which he kept records of every woman that he had killed, including how they died. He was astonished that investigators did not find the trophies or his diary. If the police had just lifted up the printer, he said, they would have found everything if they'd just taken that dang computer. They'd probably taken the printer and found everything. It's crazy. So after Crutchley bonded out of jail, he removed the diary and trophies as well as other mementos that were still hidden around the house and property. Then he stashed them somewhere away from the house, someplace that the police would not find, someplace they are hidden to this day. In June 1986, Crutchley pled guilty to kidnapping and rape charges against Laura Murphy in exchange for prosecutors dropping the grievous bodily harm charge for extracting the victim's blood and for drug possession. Crutchley asked that the blood drinking not be considered in his sentencing because, in this case, he had not actually drunk the blood. He claimed that it had coagulated before he could drink it, and he couldn't get it down. Crutchley's wife, Karen, did not take the stand, but told reporters that her husband was not guilty, was just a kinky sort of guy. Karen asserted that a man with such a brilliant mind should not be shut away from society in a state prison. Karen Crutchley did not attend the actual sentence, but voiced similar disgust over what she perceived to be grossly excessive sentence for her husband. She stated, I can't see why it exceeded the guidelines. It was a gentle, devoid of any overt brutality. That may be the weirdest two words ever put together, gentle. And I've heard some weird things. After all, I am a vampire. John Crutchley was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. After serving 11 years of his sentence, Crutchley was released on August 8, 1996, because it could not be proven that he committed any of the murders. Officials in Bridgeport, West Virginia, where his mother lived, did not want him, nor did authorities in Malabar or Melbourne. I'm sorry if I pronounced either one of those wrong. I don't even know. I think I'm pronouncing them right. Therefore, Crutchley was transferred to the Orlando probation and a halfway house. Less than a day later, however, Crutchley was arrested for violating his parole after testing positive for marijuana. The violation of his parole resulted in a sentence of life imprisonment to be imposed on January 31st, 1997. If investigators' suspicions are correct, Crutchley should be counted among the deadliest serial killers in American history. Yet during a killing career that appears to have spanned at least a decade, he was never charged with a single homicide. On March 30th, 2002, Crutchley died in prison. Correction officials reported on April 2nd, 2002 that he had been found dead in his cell at the Hardy Correctional Institute with a plastic bag over his head. Later, they actually found out that he died from autoerotic asphyxiation. In other words, at the end, he even got turned on by his own death. So the tale of John Crutchley comes to an end, if you can call it that. His name may have faded from the headlines, but the darkness he left behind still hums like static in the Florida air. His house may look ordinary now, but trust me, the walls remember. Fancying himself a vampire, but he misunderstood the hunger entirely. Real vampires like yours truly don't drain life to feel powerful. We sip it, savor it, respect it. We understand that blood is sacred. He turned it into cruelty, and that's why his immortality died before it ever began. So, my dear little night owls, this has been your host, Holly the Vampire, whispering from the warm glow of the fire at the murder she shed. Remember, monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they wave from the driveway and say good morning. Until next time, my darlings, keep your garlic close, your curiosity closer, and whatever you do, don't accept rides from men who smile too much. Now, before you creep away, my little nerdy darklings, stay for my bloopers. Women beware. John Crutchley turned from nerd to nightmare. It was lovely. But that actually could be the garlic that my husband tried to poison me with at dinner. I'm not going to lie. A big brain, a big paycheck, a big I'll tell you about that later. Like a girl. In fact, profound emotional insecurity and absence of even the most basic social skills. Like to have been a woman, and that he often imagined himself as a woman. Kind of reminds me of that movie I just watched of Ed Gein. Wow, I don't know why I brought that in there, but if you haven't watched that on Netflix, it's not the most accurate movie, but it is spooky. It is definitely spooky. And I didn't mean to add that in there, so I'll have to cut this out. Why does it feel like my wig's coming off? I keep sliding backwards and I look like I'm bald in the front occasionally. I'm doing my best, y'all. I'm doing my best. And they would get together with these couples and they would do some weekend twister games. I'm trying. Some of these women would say John would sometimes wear a mask in bed. Oh, not a screen mask. I seen that women are into that. Why would a woman be in a screen mask? I don't know where all this is going. I better be a nun again. I'm too crazy when I'm a vampire. Crazy comes out. What do you expect? The kind of woman he preferred. The kind who would never challenge, never question, only yield to him. I started saying, well, too bad robots weren't invented yet. He needed one of those. But then I remembered robots didn't have blood. So, well, that probably wouldn't make him happy. I see you.
My vampire feet made me move so sweet. The moonlight is an extra treat. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Thanks for all, we are having a ball. Let's go, y'all. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. We dance until we get that feel of romance. Don't leave it to chance. Groove, do the vampire move. Groove, do the vampire move. Get that blood pumping so we can do some vampire sucking. No time like now to be my vampire child. Groove, let's all do the vampire move.